Hello, I'm Dr. Joseph, and I would like to tell you the story about where baby sign language came from. I've been asked by many parents about that discovery process, so here it is. When I was very, very young in first grade, I remember being put into the back of the classroom with other special needs kids because back in the 50s, where I was going to school, they didn't have special education. So a lot of the parochial schools would take special needs kids. And even though I was not special needs, I was a person of color and it was an all Caucasian community, so they naturally put me in the back of the classroom. There was a deaf child next to me, and there was also a blind child in the back of the room. And I got to be friends with the deaf person as best as I could, not having the language to communicate in. But he and I played a few little hand games. Like there was a game we used to play where one person would put their hand like this, and the other person would have to try to get their finger in the hole before the other person went like that. And we played that all the time when we were little kids. But the important thing about that is that I was exposed to deaf people at a very young age and didn't see it as an unusual thing. It was just they happened to be deaf, just like the person happened to be blind. Didn't make any difference to me. We were all friends. So as I grew up and started into education, I took that experience with me. And when I joined the military in 1970, I was on leave the last time before going overseas. And I met a group of deaf people in Houston, Texas at a reunion. They had gone to the School for the Deaf, and they were there 4th of July at Sam Houston Park, and I joined their little group of people. They invited me in to join the group because I was all alone, sitting in the middle of the grass watching the fireworks demonstration. They asked me to join their groups, which I did, but they were all quiet. I didn't understand why they were so quiet. The fireworks are going off, and I'm having a great time and talking about each explosion, but no one was talking to me. Finally, when it was over, one of the people came up to me and says, "You want to come with pizza for me?" And I didn't quite understand. What did you say? "You want to come and have pizza with us?" So she was a deaf person and she could articulate quite well, I thought. So I said, "Sure, let's go for pizza." So I ended up going out with pizza with them, and being a person of sleight of hand and magician in my past, I did some magic for them and they enjoyed that. And I bought their pizzas because I had lots of money being in the military and nowhere to spend it. Anyway, we became friends, and I vowed myself, if I ever survive the military, this is back in 1970s, so it was a pretty dangerous time to be in the military. And but if I did survive, I was going to learn sign language and be able to communicate with my deaf friends. So I did. Survived the military when I was in a ski bum up at Lake Tahoe. I ended up going to UNR, University of Nevada, Reno, taking a sign language class from another veteran who became deaf from the military. The anti-malaria drugs caused a lot of our servicemen to become deaf. And I learned sign language from him in a small class. Met my first group of deaf people who were working with the chimpanzees who knew sign at the time. And anyway, learned to sign. In fact, they invited me to hang with them, the deaf community in Reno, which I did. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I learned from the deaf. I just put earplugs in my ears and became deaf for this summer and immersed in sign language. And that's how I became an interpreter and a signer. But I didn't know the impact that would have in my life until later on when I had my own children. And I noticed that even though I would communicate in sign to my dog sled team up in Alaska, and I signed with the chimpanzees, which was a transformational experience to say the least, but having signed with the animals and the chimps, I knew that this was a really amazing language, this gestural way to communicate. So when I had my own children, I noticed that young children, hearing children of deaf adults, could sign clearly with their parents more than a year before hearing children of hearing parents would say their first word. And I thought, wow, they have clear communication in their family long before traditional developing speaking children have communication. Well, why don't we adopt that into our culture? So I decided to do some research and find out Will learning to sign as a young child inhibit spoken language, or what will it do to a child? Will it increase their communicative abilities, or what will it do? Well, I set out on a study. I was in graduate school and I did that study, and I came up to the conclusion that all babies can use gestural communication, deaf or not, hearing or not, it doesn't matter. And not only will signing when you're very young before speech begins not inhibit language, but it actually gives the child language. Even though it's not a spoken language, it's still organizing their thoughts with nomenclatures. Even though they're gestures rather than words, they're still categorizing their thoughts. They're able to express themselves through their gestures just as well as they could with words, but they haven't developed the vocal mechanism that allows them to articulate the various global languages, and as a result, signs are what's available to them to communicate. Well, I gave my children signs, of course. I used them in a very special way, and I'll go into that in the next part of my presentation. But I presented the signs what I thought was the most productive way to give language to a child without putting stress or expectation on them. And the result is that my children exploded with language long before they could articulate their first word. And we had an amazing relationship. But what I found out to be the most important part of that entire experience was that my children had confidence. They could affect their environment with their communication. And that gave them just the power they needed in order to guide or navigate through life rather than waiting for life to happen to them. And to this day, I can see that effect on them. Their capacity to go out there and engage with life because they have the skills to communicate and affect their environment. As a result, that little cultural imprint between the first year of life or second year of life really made a profound impact on the rest of their total communicative capacity as well as their confidence about going forth in life. Now, I have heard this again and again and again from so many parents that when they had that first year's worth of communication, or the first 2 years of clear communication, it set in motion the capacity for a child to see they can affect their environment through their own internal resources. So, I found that signing is not only important, but the way you present the signs and how you communicate with an infant is almost as important as the concept of communication. And I will cover that in my 14 Days to Baby Sign Language program that is available now on the website, drjosephgarcia.com. And you can click and subscribe below to have more information. And if you have a suggestion or a comment or a question, put it in below also. And I'll try to answer it as soon as I can. So thanks for listening.